So the last thing to figure out is the spacing between the heading and the paragraph. It looks a little smaller here. So how do we tackle that? Well, in previous videos, we talked about both padding and margin is the way that we separate two elements. Now before we move on, I'm going to save this CSS file by highlighting this and typing Control or Command S. So what I want to see here is where this margin is coming from. So I'm going to start by inspecting this element, and you can see with the orange right here that it seems that the header is responsible for this height. If we hovered over the paragraph, you can see that the paragraph has some upper margin, but it doesn't bump all the way up to the heading. And remember that between elements, both of the elements can define a margin, but the biggest one is going to be used. If we highlight the heading one, and we go over here to the right and we scroll down, we can see that the margin is set by default to 36.52 pixels. So that's the distance from the bottom of the tail of the J or the P, for example. But what we want is whatever this space is up here. So I'm going to measure that. So it's about 25 pixels. So if we modified this here to say margin bottom, and then we set it to 25 pixels, it'll bump it up a bit, and that looks a lot closer. Let's measure it one more time. So the space here, it's a little hard to read, but it's about 31 or 32 pixels. So where is that extra space coming from? Well, if we look again at our heading, we see that the margin is a lot smaller, so that's good, but there's still some space between the margin and the top of the text down below, and that has to do with the line height. So if we highlight this paragraph and we toggle the line height here by clicking this box, you can see that the text moves up a bit closer to the heading to where we get to about what we want in the mockup. But when we add the line height back, it bumps it down. So this is something that we have to factor in. So if we highlight the heading 1 again, we can kind of eyeball the margin to drop it a couple pixels. Let's go to 22, or how about 20? Okay, now if we measure, we get about 27. And when we measure it up here again, we're at 25. So we can bump this up to 22 to add those extra 2 pixels. Phew, okay, that was a little bit tricky, but this will get faster the more you do it. And we're going to have to do it quite a bit as we work through the rest of the template. So one cool thing about having connected up our CSS file with Chrome is that as we edit styles in here, the styles are automatically saved in our source. So if we scroll down to our slide title right here, you can see that our changes with the margin have been saved in our CSS file. Nice.